Commodore, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Royal Ocean Racing Club and this Fastnet debrief. Aim of this evening is to have a performance debrief for classes 2, 3 and 4 with some of the most successful local sailors in the fleet and really focus on what they did well, what went wrong and how we can all learn from that from the future. So that's the idea. We've got a hard stop of finishing by 7:30 to let people have dinner, but until then we're going to run a panel discussion, go through a whole bunch of questions and then have a chance at the end to have questions. And then I think everyone's hopefully staying around for dinner. So if anyone's got any more questions, we've got the whole night away to chat away. So that's the plan. Let me start by introducing everyone. I'm Debrief Fish. I'm one of the rear Commodores here at the RORC. Ella.
Hi, I'm Ella Boxall. I'm a data analyst for sailing.
And everyone must use the microphone when they speak.
Hi, I'm Tim Goodhew. I run the Sunfast 3200 called Cora in IRC 3 and double-handed.
Hi, I'm Henry Foster. I'm skipper of Fujitsu British Soldier, the Army entry into the Fastnet this year.
Good evening, Ed Clay. I'm sailing double-handed on Flycatcher in Class 4. She might be known to some RORC members because she used to belong to a Commodore of RORC, John Room, and we thought it'd be fun to bring her on her 50th birthday to the 50th Fastnet.
Hi, I'm Ben Palmer. I was sailing double-handed on Surf, Sunfast 3300 with Sam Ebersfield. It was actually our first RORC Fastnet, and lucky to come 6th in IRC Two.
Fantastic. And we also have Red Ruby, who are going to just give us a... so Red Ruby sail a Sunfast 3300. They fly in from Seattle to race with us, and they've got a short video clip of why they come racing with us.
We love to sail double-handed, and the UK and the Solent and France have going on is that it's really a mecca for double-handed racing. And it's not only just double-handed racing in terms of the number of boats, but in terms of the types of boats and the narrow rating bands. So it's pretty close to one design. And it makes the competition just fantastic. The races are close. The races are races you have to race every minute to the very end. And for us, that has been something we've loved. And Fastnet was a bucket list race for us to do. And we've enjoyed every minute.
Yeah, I mean, to have 100 double-handed boats in this race, and again, with that really tight rating band, I mean, it was fascinating for the length of the race. You know, as we were coming back to the Scillies, so 450 to 500 miles into the race, and we crossed within a boat length of another 3,300. Mm-hmm. And we could see on AIS 20 double-handed boats at the 500-mile mark. I mean, that's, to even have 20 boats in a race is one thing, but to have 20 of them within sight after 500 miles, impossible. You can't recreate that anywhere else in the world.
Cool. So that was Chris and Justin Wolf from Red Ruby. Splendid. Ella's going to start off. Ella is an analyst. She works for SailGP, and she's done a little bit of analysis from the tracker of what worked well when. So Ella, give us an overview.
Okay, so I've split it into Class 2 and 3 because they were together most of the time, and then Class 4 separately. So I'll just go on to Class 2 and 3. So obviously, you guys had quite a good start, Class 2 and 3. There were minimal boats OCS, and obviously everyone got the tidal gains out of the Solent really, really well. So obviously the next big decision is Hurst Castle to go inshore or to go offshore. So this screenshot is from the tracker. So it's 27 minutes past 4, which is high water +1 Portsmouth. So obviously it was a big split in the fleet, half and half. Stronger tide offshore, so obviously that's some gains as well. But obviously you pair that with a bigger chop. So obviously it's difficult to drive, it's harder to keep those speeds, but the offshore boats generally kept a faster speed than inshore. So it's kind of a trade-off between, do you want to kill your crew going offshore, harder to drive? Do you want to make them suffer more, or do you want to preserve them inshore so that they're fresher for the rest of the race? Okay. The next big decision is where to go at Portland Bill to go inshore or offshore again. So this is most of Class 2 and 3 going around Portland Bill. It's 2146 BSC, which is high water +6 on Dover. So Red Ruby made some massive gains, it going really, really inshore. But the other thing you have to look at is positioning-wise, when that tide changes, where do you want to be? Inshore, offshore? You can make some gains initially, but as soon as that tide changes, where do you want to be? And then the next big pivotal point of the race is the Land's End TSS. So this is 0846, high water +5 Dover. So front half of the fleet went north above the North Scilly TSS. The back half of the fleet, more split, but generally more of them went under that North TSS. There were some tidal gains for the front boats to go north. So thank you to Cora. It's a beautiful picture of the Fastnet Rock, but as you can see, there isn't much wind. So you can definitely see a massive compression at the rock for these classes. The average speeds were about 4 to 5 knots and everybody compressed. So Scilly TSS on the way home is another massive pivotal point in the race. So big split in the fleet, and Red Ruby and Bellino were matching for speed here, but then Red Ruby pulling away within the next kind of 4 or 5 hours after that screenshot. So here's some lovely results of Class 2. So obviously the French do dominate. They are very, very good. But obviously, I've got to give a little shout out to Red Ruby and Surf for doing really well, and Chili Pepper in Class 2 overall. And then in Class 3 as well, again, lots of French domination, but Cora, you guys have a massive shout out, and Disco Trooper as well, from coming all the way over from Australia to race in this race. So yeah, well done. I think this year's Fastnet was really challenging, and everybody did really well to finish. And those of you that didn't, good decisions for your crew and your boat. So we now go on to Class 4. So you guys are the smaller end of the spectrum. This is, again, Hurst Castle to go inshore or offshore. This is 6:30, so high water +3 Portsmouth. Again, stronger tide offshore. It's the same trade-off. Do you go offshore, bigger chop, harder to steer, crew preservation, or do you go inshore? It was actually a bit of a trade-off. There was half a knot in it in boat speed, so actually it's a big decision about whether you want to keep your crew fresh versus go offshore for that tidal gains, but it didn't actually make much of a difference this race. Portland Bill, again, inshore or offshore. Inshore definitely paid, with the inshore boats are not faster than the offshore boats. So the guys who went inshore, good job. Yeah, that's it, well done. Land's End TSS. Obviously, there's a big split. There's 3 boats that went north, and the rest of the fleet went south of that TSS. So the front pack definitely went a different decision, but I think the boats by the Scilly Isles definitely gained on those front runners there. So good call. There was definitely a tidal gain to go in between. Fastnet Rock in complete opposition to Class 2 and 3, who compressed at the rock. Here, the Class 4 boats all went round in procession, and the conditions slightly favoured the leaders. They were about, again, half a knot faster after rounding the rock. See Scilly TSS on the way home. Nearly all the fleet went south of the Scilly Isles. The few that went above had a slight speed advantage over the rest of the fleet. Again, half a knot to a knot in it, but yeah, definitely good for them to go around. And they had a little bit of a procession on the way home, and this is their results. Obviously, bit more of a mix of nationality in this fleet, but obviously again, French, the front runners, and then with Alacrity and Flycatcher coming 3rd and 4th respectively. So very well done to you guys. So yeah, I'm going to pass back over to Deb, who's going to continue with the panel discussion.
Cool. Thanks, Ella. And we did invite With Alacrity to join us, but unfortunately they weren't able to, which is a bit of a shame. But anyway, thank you, Ella. That's great. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an overview. What I then want to do is delve into a bit of the detail and hear a lot more from individual people. So obviously the race started, as it always does, with the decision about which way to go on the Needles and how to get to Portland. And it's always a race to get to Portland before the tide or as soon as you can after the tide. So I want to start with Cora and British Soldier. Tim, which way did you choose to go and how was it?
We chose the Needles Channel and then inshore Portland. It was kind of fine in both of those places. We looked at the 2021 Fastnet tracker. We thought about our experiences in that race as well, which was very similar conditions at the start, and judged that it would be fine in the Needles Channel. I know there was the chat in the briefing about whether we should be going Needles Channel or North Channel, but we thought with the less tide, because compared to 2021, 2021 was a spring tide and this was less springy than that, we thought it's going to be fine. And it kind of was. Like, we got a bit wet, but there weren't many waves that we thought these are damaging.
Okay.
And then the same. I mean, we knew we had this plan from the start to go straight to Portland. With the wind direction that it was, it meant you had to be on port as soon as you got to bridge. And we went straight there. Didn't even look at the nav table, to be honest, because we knew where we were going. And Portland itself was, again, pretty fine. The conditions there were less bouncy, more of a huge swell. So we sort of rose up it, accelerated down, but it was kind of fun, more than anything else. So it was like we did it in, I don't know what it was like for the guys in IRC4, but we did it in the last of the daylight. You could see the beach, you could see the lighthouse silhouette. It was intimidating, but it wasn't scary. It was just like, these are some pretty fruity conditions.
Okay, so safe, you felt?
I thought, I never felt in danger, and I felt that we were gaining doing both of those things.
And how much wind did you have at Portland Bill?
Portland Bill, probably 30 to 35.
Okay.
The most wind we saw was off Old Harry, it was about 40 knot gusts.
Yeah.
But it was, that was the most we saw. We saw it once.
Cool.
So.
Thank you. Henry, how's it for
Deb.
you with all your crew on the rail?
Well, I should start by explaining I feel like a bit of a fraud, I think. Everyone else had a great second half of the race. It turns out if you're going to have a great half of the race, then have it in the second half, not the first half. So our first half was really good. So not only am I the token fully crewed member of the panel, but also we had a great first half. I wouldn't listen to much that I say about the second half because we threw it away slightly, but we'll get onto that, I'm sure. I think... so for us, we had a plan and we executed it. We did exactly what we intended to do, but the first decision was made not on nav but sail selection by my navigator. I think the first rule is if sailing on a fully crewed boat, don't let your navigator touch a rope, because he came upstairs and having said we'd run the first reef through the leach of the mainsail and we were going to put the second one in as it went up. The first thing my navigator did when I said babysit that reef line as it goes up and I'll tie it off when we get the sail to full hoist, I saw him frantically pulling and he pulled it out from the clutch, so that lost us our second reef line, which meant putting the second reef in was going to be a bit of an epic because we'd have to de-rig the first reef to put it in. So we decided to be a bit French. If you can't beat them, join them. Big sails win big races. So we actually stuck with one reef and a J3 the whole way through the first night. And as a result of that, decided no one was going downstairs to bed. Which, being the army, sort of it's what we do. We're wet, cold, and miserable. We figured if we can't sail smarter than these guys, we better sail harder. And it worked. I'm happy to say. So we put 5 very miserable people on the rail and kept them there till 4 o'clock in the morning because we knew we just had to get through that first front. And our boat goes upwind like a rocket. We're really well set up actually amongst the 3600s. For fully crewed racing, we've got a very stiff rig, and we do tend to go upwind well in a breeze. So we knew that if we were going to touch the likes of Deb and co, with the two-handers that sail the same boats as us, we were going to have to make our gains early on. And being the army, that's what we decided to do, and we stuck with it. But we decided to go offshore early, no saving the crew, and. We were going straight out the Solent. We learnt from the lessons of the last Fastnet. We blew the J3 out the Tough Luff twice on the way out the Solent last year. So this time we used soft shackles to stop the bouncing effect at the top of the Tough Luff. We prepped for the swell, and we were pretty confident in the boat and the sails that we could get through that first night. So We did that. However, we weren't brave enough to go right in at Portland. We thought we'd get through just on the last of the tide, and our plan was always to hit St Albans, go offshore, avoid the race, and then come back inshore for Lyme Bay with the anticipated shift and what we thought was going to happen. And it turned out we executed that plan. We got through to 4 o'clock in the morning. It was pretty unpleasant with guys vomiting sweets into my face and things like that. But we got there. They didn't stop hiking, and shout out to them. And actually, when the sun came up on day 2, we were in a really good position. So pretty pleased with that.
Fantastic. And quickly, Ed, you were there a bit later in the tide at Portland Bill.
Yep.
Was it still okay then?
Yes, it was about midnight.
Half past midnight. Yep.
The ST that we went round, and we went inshore. And yeah, I was surprised how good it was. It was much better than the Neal's Channel where we went. And you also got the shelter behind the bill. So the approach to the bill was actually, I think, where most of the gain is, because we obviously had the tide against us for a fair period. So we gained a lot there, and the flat water. And then it's unnerving. Unlike Tim, I was asking a lot of questions of where these rocks are and how close are we, and was feeling pretty nervous because it was dark. But the sea conditions weren't a concern. I think actually, if you only have to be a couple of 100 meters offshore, and it feels horrible. So it is really hold your nerve and staying close.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, Ben, later, but we've got a quick clip. Have we got the clip from Red Ruby? They also went inshore at Portland Bill.
The reason we went inside is because we got there early enough. And so there wasn't so much the strategy of how we rounded, but how soon we got there, which backed all the way up to the start. When we were really trying hard to get a good start, to get moving, knowing that these gates were going to be out there. And so every minute counted from the start line. But, at Portland Bill, it was the boats that got there soonest had the least adverse current. And then we even found, as we got to the southwest part of Portland Bill, that we were able to ease sheets because of the current, and we were going 10 knots over ground headed due west. And I'm sure that made a big difference compared to the boats that were a mile or two south of Portland Bill.
And come on, Chris, that must have been a bit gnarly round there.
It was. We were there with Mzungu, but on our boat, it was a huge relief to actually get by Portland Bill because everything setting into it, it just was a washing machine. I had cracked my rib and Justin was a bit seasick. So Portland Bill is definitely one of the notable benchmarks of the race.
So crew preservation versus optimal sailing, a good example of that there. Cool. Right. So next we've talked about getting around at Land's End and the Scillies and starting in the Celtic Sea, where we had our second rough weather system. Ben, tell us a bit about the conditions you experienced and the experience you had there.
Yes, I think we're a bit of an opposite to Henry. We didn't have the greatest start. We had a better second half of the race, which is actually quite nice to have a good second half. Separate to these guys, we've got a lot to learn. This was our first RORC Fastnet, so we wanted to go inshore at Portland. We lined up for it and then went, this is getting a bit dark. It's like 8:39. We're going to go out, and it was pretty. We were punching a lot of tide, and it's a long way round. But my sort of reflections on that was, I'd like to go and do it in 15 knots in the middle of the day and just test it out first, and then I can do it in 35 knots at night. We were just sort of behind the sort of front runners, and our aim was just to try and stay within touching distance of them, which was hard as we were missing the tidal gates like by an hour each time. Just as we got into the Celtic Sea, so we went north of that Land's End TSS, we started getting into that second sort of weather system. So we don't know what the weather was. We lost our wind instruments, but it felt pretty windy. There was so it must have been, I think, 30 knots, but we can let these guys tell you what it was. We were going pretty well. We were J3, 2 reefs in the main. We actually snapped both our reefing lines, but we refitted them in the weather. So I think that is possible. And I was like, this is going pretty well. There was people dropping sails around us, but J3, 2 reefs was pretty good. We were low fast, doing 8-9 knots, and then Sam pops up from down below and says, "Have you seen that?" And the sail, and I look up, and there's basically how the sail was built. It's not built to take structural loads around Reef 2 very well. So the panel the panel is a radial sail, so the panel goes up, but your loads at Reef 2 are quite, at 40 degrees from the clew. So we were just splitting that panel apart. So yeah, we had to drop the main, and we went on jib alone for about 5 hours until the weather improved, and then luckily I brought a lot of tape. So I had a meter roll by 3 meters of heavy-duty Dacron tape. I think I'd like to have taken some more stuff and some Sikaflex as well, but luckily that was able to hold for the rest of the race.
We've got a picture of it here.
Yes.
You can see all the patching up there.
So that was all around the structural point of Reef 2. It's not built to do two big storms, it seems.
So interesting points there about having the sails that are set up for bad weather as well as good weather, but also taking the repair kit. I mean, what do other people take by way of spares? Repair kits?
Well, I'm fortunate enough to sail with a chap from North Sails in Kelvin, and he brought his extensive repair kit, which thankfully we didn't need. But yeah, your move, Ben, to take that kit was probably saved your race, didn't it? And we had similar amount of stuff, big bag of sail repair kit, which would have repaired our main if we needed to. But yeah, what more can be said? Take your spares.
Cool. And does anybody have instrument problems? I mean, we certainly did. Electronics problems all the way around. Anybody else have instrument problems?
I think we can
Of
all
any
go
kind?
here. You go first, I'll go next.
Take your pick. Our navigator's shining again. I don't want to blame him. He's a great mate. But actually, I think the issue we had was not necessarily the instruments, which we'd worked quite hard on calibrating and making sure that, because we think the amount of performance gain that we've got over the years by calibrating the instruments properly and putting the time and effort into it has been huge, particularly in the sort of dark hours. But we went with a brand new Surface Pro, having our old sort of beaten up tough book that's got us round several RORC seasons. We decided to go with a brand new piece of kit that it turns out any drop of moisture near the charging equipment meant we only had one charge for our Alderney. So our ability to plan for the first 24 to 48 hours was brilliant. But then when it got absolutely soaking, and I mean properly soaking, it turned out that we lost the ability to charge it, which meant we only had one shot with our Alderney. So our ability to download gribs and replan, that basically packed up by about Land's End. So our race, which is characterised by really good plan, executed it well for the first third. We held on through those compressions. The two compressions are, Land's End and the Fastnet Rock. We held on through those. And then as our understanding of the weather degraded, we made worse and worse choices and reverted to sailing shortest possible distance. And that's where we started to come apart. So I think from our perspective, it was making sure that the kit is bulletproof, and it was the software, where the routing, the thing that gives us the routing, and AIS and whatever else that really degraded for us.
Anybody else?
Yes, to answer the question, we lost our autopilot sometime before the Fastnet Rock. In the lighter airs, things started short-circuiting. Could not find the issue. We do have an isolator switch on the pilot, which was really useful, because what was happening was the pilot was engaging and then going hard over, and we couldn't do anything about it. So we had to isolate the pilot. And then when we got back to handball, I found a cable that had been severed slightly at the bottom of the mast and was short-circuiting everything. The instruments did hold up, weirdly, for most of the race. Sometimes it would just give you an error, and then you rebooted it and it was fine. We also broke a wind instrument at the top of the rig in a broach on the last day. So we did a lot of the race hand steering with dodgy wind instruments. And they're still not really fixed. I mean, I've got to do loads of calibration. It's all a bit of a mess, but yeah.
Some of our instruments are 50 years old, so we knew we were setting off to do a lot of hand steering and not really have any calibrated instruments.
As I said, we lost our wind instruments just outside Hurst, basically, so that was the first thing. But similar to Henry Water, luckily our laptop survived, but my phone didn't. And my sort of lesson from that is, we had obviously the top of the hatch closed, but still with the water coming over the top, was the rubber seals weren't holding, and then water was pouring down below. And my thinking is, how can we make that? Can we have a nice sort of fabric waterproof seal that does the complete companionway, really seal it up? Because that obviously has a big impact. We got wet kit, we got lost phones. We luckily didn't lose a laptop, but that was a thought from my part.
You could have used all your sticky Dacron if you hadn't used it on the sail. Cool. Okay. So the rock itself. Obviously, we all had light airs at the rock. That was challenging. Any particular strategies for navigating the calms? Any joys there? Red Ruby, haven't I? Yeah, we'll take that then. We'll go back to Red Ruby.
So in class 4, we actually had our light patch was halfway across. So we sat there, didn't really go anywhere. By the time we got to the rock, it was a nice breeze and getting dark. So it was fairly processional bit for us, like Ella said.
Anyone thought they made a gain there?
Yeah, we did.
Any secrets?
I think we were a little bit fortunate on timing because we were behind the leaders of Class 2, but in the mix of Class 2, being an IRC 3 boat, that was very rewarding anyway. But we didn't really stop, but we could see boats had. And so we were just, and I think it was the morning of day 4, we were peeling through from jib to kite to code 0 just to try and keep in bits of wind and keep the boat moving towards the Fastnet Rock. It was quite fortunate. I think I wouldn't put it down to skill on that part of the race. We just, the way the weather system worked out for us was that we didn't stop and others had, and we compressed into the guys in Class 2, like Mzungu, I think, were up there, and Red Ruby, probably you guys.
British Soldier, I think.
British Soldier, probably. I thought you were too far ahead. I didn't see you on our AIS, but yeah, I think we gained, but not through any particular skill.
How was it from the other end?
I mean, you're being modest. We've seen over a number of seasons how quick you guys are in the light, so which is soul destroying from our perspective. There comes a point where you're half a ton of miserable crew weight on the rail, which has been so productive for the first third, is not so productive when you're sitting staring at the rock for hours on end. I think for us the biggest challenge was we had quite a good duel with Caravel. I think one of the French JPK 1080s who was sailing really well. We got the kite up and we watched the kite sail to us. You know, sort of we've been coming upwind into the rock. We sat in a hole. Then we watched the spinnakers going up behind us and worked really hard. We kept the boat moving. We had a really good battle with them. But I think this was the point where, you know, it didn't help that my youngest had given me a nursery bug as well. So I was shivering one minute and sweating the next. But it was sort of a case, the joys of young children. No. But it was at the same time going into the rock. It was for us. It was soul destroying watching people sail into us from behind, and you know those compressions when you've worked hard to build a really a decent lead, and you're sort of we were showing up 4th on IRC at one point to then keep the guys' heads up and keep going and know that it's a long race and fight back. I think that's what the 600 milers with so many opportunities to make gains. That's why the Fastnet is a race that bizarrely keeps us all coming back, because there are opportunities, there's snakes and ladders the whole way through. And I think with this one, seeing those 3 fronts rolling through, there's always opportunities to be made, and the race isn't over until you get to Cherbourg, unfortunately for us. So it was, but keeping the guys motivated and keeping going through that was a bit of a challenge. But the crew, well, I would say this, but the army mentality was fantastic through that bit, and morale stayed high. So all good.
Fantastic, cool. So what about the way back then? How was your way back? Which way did you go around the TSS? Did it pay?
So yeah, we benefited a little bit from that compression, just as Henry said, right? We didn't have a great first half, but just sort of thought, right, we're going to try and limit our losses and wait for some opportunities to come back. And luckily there was one around the Fastnet Rock, and then on the way back for us, it seemed clear we were going to go right. We're going to go north and east of that Land's End, the City Isles TSS. For us trying to get up to get to the other side with the sail set up, so we had a code 0 staysail. We couldn't get there, so it was too much of a speed loss to go the other side. So it was just like, right, we're heading straight for that corner. And actually, lucky for us, as we approached it, the wind started backing, lifting us, and we actually dropped the 0 and went for a kite for half an hour or so, just as we approached that corner, and then went up and around Bishop's Rock.
And the timing was quite critical there, because we looked at it and there was a forecast shift which suggested if you went north of the Scilly West TSS, you would just get there as a shift came and you'd be okay. But if it came late, you'd be beating. And what we observed on the tracker was that the leading boats who went that way lost a lot. I think we gained about 5 miles on Axtell that way. But those who got there just at the right time or after gained from that. But it was a risk, and we've been caught out that way before, so we were wary. How about you, Ed?
So, like Ella said, in Class 4, pretty much all of the boats and all of the leaders went to the south of that TSS, so that was a fairly easy decision for us. That was actually the hardest bit of the race for me. We had pretty poor visibility and sailing in the dark, not really knowing which way was up. It got windy again. That was the bit actually I found the hardest. Tired, disorientated.
And how was the final leg from the Scillies to Cherbourg then?
That bit was more fun. got the spinnaker up, and enjoyed that bit, I think.
Okay. So way back from the Scillies, what were your experiences, Tim?
Well, firstly, just on the Scilly's TSS thing, we did look at going the north route, and we knew that shift was coming at some point, but I spent most of that leg, we did go the west route in the end, the southwest route, but I spent most of that leg thinking, what's the timing of this shift? What's actually going to happen? Because in the St. Malo race and the La Trinité race, 2 weeks before, all of the shifts happened later than the forecast. So we were trying to, the thing going through my head for that entire leg, across the Celtic Sea was, just got to maximise VMG to where we know we can get to. And for us, the timing of it was such that it didn't make much difference, I don't think. I think if you're a bit, let's say, 2 hours behind, probably would do your route, Ben, was quicker. For us, I don't think there was much in it. The route back from the Scillies to the finish, we got some weather forecast at the Scillies, and we could see some big breeze coming in. Again, third time in the race, 30 plus knots. And the mistake that we made was not going high enough, early enough, I think.
High being south.
High being south, yeah. So the wind was coming in from the southwest and forecast to back, so go forward on us the whole time. We did execute that. We went higher early, but we didn't do it enough. We haven't sailed the boat in those conditions that much, to be honest. So that's it's probably a training point. But I think if we'd have sailed higher to the south earlier, we may have been able to hold on to the lead in our class. But the JPK 1010s were so rapid on that last leg when the wind went forward, they were going 5, maybe 10% faster than us consistently, and just blew us away, which was frustrating. But there was nothing we could do at that point. We'd have had to do it 12 hours earlier. So that's the lesson. The lesson is know your boat's polars and route to them. We didn't really know our boat's polars in 30 knot of breeze, 140 true wind angle. We didn't know how the boat would behave, because we don't sail in those conditions very often at all. So,
yeah. Any other comments on the leg back, or going around the Channel Islands, sort of around Alderney and Cap de la Hague?
Yeah. So I think for us there was a bit of optimism bias crept in. I mean, this is how I think we felt the Fastnet owed us one by this point. Some nice VMG downwind sailing, with a big symmetric spinnaker and all the things that we've optimised the boat towards. We were exactly the same. We came. We actually, I don't think our move around the Scillies cost us. We separated, but it cost us a lot of lateral separation with the likes of Bellino and Black Sheep critically in the end. And with that part of the fleet all sailing higher than us, i.e. going further south, we elected to sail the rum line, square the kite back. Couldn't have been a worse decision, I think. But this is where our lack of understanding of the forecast and how far the wind angle was going to change really hurt us, because as the breeze came forward and built, it meant that we were off the spinnaker earlier, and we went from our S2 to our A5, and then ultimately onto our onto our jib top and GS. And while we were going fast and we were hitting speeds of 22 knots through the night, 23 knots, it was the average speed that killed us. People were doing consistently higher averages, whereas we were peaking and troughing the whole way. And that was how, unfortunately, we lost IRC Two Alpha to Black Sheep, who got through us. And fair play to them, they sailed brilliantly around the side of us, and were able to keep the bigger sails up for longer. And big sails win big races. So we should have gone higher sooner. And that's ultimately, it felt a bit deflating, but actually just finishing in the end was a bit of a victory. So, and you know, coming out where we did in IRC Two Alpha, despite having tumbled down the rankings in IRC Two overall, is you know, it was still a massive effort. And we beat the Navy, so.
I'm going to throw a spanner in the works. We like the rum line back from the Scilly Isles, so we popped out just by Bishop's Rock, just in front of Cora, and I think probably related to the boat, right? The 3300 likes big waves, so we went A3, probably went a little bit higher than the rum line initially, just because we're an asymmetric kite and we're forced up a bit. So we came up a little, but we were not as high as the likes of, you know, Chili Pepper. And then as the breeze built, we got knocked down. And as soon as we got close to the rum line, we went right, dropped to the A3, went to the code 0. And then we were flat out along the rum line until the last hours of the darkness, which ultimately was our bottle. Our plan was to take the code 0 through the night. And then we just went, because this is the shipping lane now and it's dark. So we felled it away. But we were doing good averages with the code 0 up 18, 19 knots along the rum line. So thinking, I wouldn't have sailed the extra distance. I think it was fine. But it's related to the boat. I think it's really related to the boat.
And what was your top speed?
22, 23 knots, yeah.
Cool. Excellent. Any comments on going around Alderney and Cap to the Hague? Because that's obviously a new part of the race, and it's a critical part of the race. Less so because we had plenty of wind, but massive tides there. I mean, we were lucky in Bellino. We got past Cap de la Hague and pretty much slack tide, and then we had a little bit against us coming into Cherbourg. But chatting to some friends on killing time, you know, they said they had 6 knots against them and big standing waves because the tide was against the wind. And they even, I think, took their jib down because, you know, they were so worried they were going to lose the mast. And I think someone did lose the mast in those conditions. Any comments on tidal strategies there or experiences you had?
So we came by with the tide turned against us about Alderney and was building against us from there. Back to what Tim said about execute your strategy properly. We talked about the fact that we were going to get swept south, and that we should soak early to make sure we had plenty of north to allow ourselves to soak south and not having to soak at that last minute or potentially even jibe. We got away with it, but some people didn't. So it really was, you've got to be thinking ahead about what's going to be happening in an hour's time, because that tide takes you south or north, and you need to be in the right place to deal with that. Was my conclusion.
Yeah, I think follow the French was my
ahead at that point.
was my fault. We were right next to a JPK as we come just past Alderney, and obviously it's dark and can't see a thing, and they were calling us on the railway on the radio to bear away because they were just to windward on us, and I was like, why do you want to bear away? Like as we were reaching in just to Cap de la Hague, and then I was like, oh, right, fine. So we bared away, let them go down, and we came up behind them. So we went up above the windward, and right, shortest distance, went straight into all of that standing waves and 7 knots of tide. They sailed completely around the outside of us, and were in front on that reach to the finish. So yeah, they knew where they wanted to go.
And how much did they gain on that manoeuvre, do you think?
They probably gained a couple at the finish. Probably a quarter of a mile.
Okay. So not that much.
Not massive, but yeah, from being, you know, within a boat length to a quarter of a mile. Yeah.
Cool. Let's take the final clip from Chili Pepper, because they had some they were flying on the way back. Beg your pardon, from Red Ruby.
You know, that last leg in the channel, it really ended up being 3 parts for us. And in the first part, right after Bishop Rock, we put up our full-size A2 spinnaker on a pole for the first time. And that was amazing. We were fast. We were able to sail low. It was great. The trouble was we only ended up being able to fly it for about 80 miles. And then the wind increased and went forward, and we couldn't fly it on the pole anymore and really didn't want that big of a kite up anymore. So we switched to an A4 that was smaller than our A2, and that on the spread, and that allowed us to reach a little bit better. But we were still right on the edge doing that. But one thing we realized was we made the decision quite early with the A4 that we were not going to carry the kite once it got dark. So we only had a few hours with the A4, but that gave us the freedom. We didn't have to sail as high and try to make the south corner of the TSS, because we knew we were going to take our kite down anyway, and then we could jib reach, and that might actually be a better angle for the jib. Well, that took the pressure off, and we were able to sail a little bit lower and faster, which also probably meant we didn't wipe out as much in that section. So we moved along well there. And then we took the kite down, put up the jib, pitch black, raining sideways, couldn't see the bow of the boat, trying to drive. The people that drove hand steered, I mean, hats off to you that you even made it to France, because you couldn't see anything. You couldn't see the waves. We opted to do that differently. We just turned on our autopilot, set it on a compass heading, and sat there and just watched. And the boat went very straight, which probably ended up being fast. We weren't going up and down and sailing extra distance. But what we noticed when we looked at the tracker, and we thought when we took that kite down that, oh man, we're being conservative, but that we're not racing to win anymore. We're just trying to get through the night. And there's others that are going to be flying their spinnakers, and that, you know, our races in terms of moving up is over. But if we look at the tracker for the night, when we took down our kites, we were something like 7 or 8 miles behind Juzzy and Festa 2, and we finished 3 miles behind them. And they flew their spinnakers all night. So I think there's a real lesson there for the group. Big sails is not always the fast way to get there. You know, we felt like we were being conservative, but we might have actually just been accidentally smart, and having the correct sail plan for the conditions and able to sail fast.
Just going back to the tide at Cap La Hague, you have to decide so early what you want to do. So you get through the Land's End and Scilly's TSS, and then you have to know what the tide's going to be doing at Alderney by the time you get there. And we looked at it, and we said we've got to be doing 100% of polars to get there. And we were doing 100% of polars at the time, but we had issues with changing sails and spinning out, and ended up fighting the first of the foul tide. We didn't have much of an option by the time we were there, but the lesson still is you've got to really look at the Alderney race when you're at the Scillies, and you've got to estimate your time there.
Cool. Thank you. What I'd like to do is conclude with one tip from each of you. You know, if there was one thing you'd pass on to people, that lessons you've learned and advice, what would it be? Let's start with you then.
Thanks, Deb. I think my main lessons actually is going out in 20 knots and practicing your heavy weather setup. So, you know, what sail plan are you going to do for 30 knots, but go and feel the balance? Because there was lots of chat about, Chili Pepper, the jib down, went with main. We actually ran 6 hours without a main on the jib, and it was fine. So working out what works for your boat, but do it in 20 knots. And go and do the Portland in a race in 15 knots and sunny conditions first to build confidence.
Ed?
So I think probably our main strength was that we knew the boat very well, and that meant that we knew what it was supposed to feel like and what might go wrong, and also that we'd broken pretty much everything that would go wrong. In fact, all the issues we had were related to the A3, which was a new sail we'd had up for about 10 minutes. Obviously, not everyone has that luxury, but to echo your point, Ben, it really is about going sailing and finding those things, and being honest about what conditions you haven't gone sailing in, and trying to find a way of doing that.
Henry?
For me, I mean, again, very similar. The bits of the programme we knew best were the bits that didn't fail. So when we were going with a One Reef and the J3, we knew the setup was bulletproof, we knew we could handle it. That's because we put a lot of time into getting to know those sails and that sail setup, and what polars, what mode we needed to sail to get through. The bit that we swapped out the week before and then didn't spend the time prepping was the laptop, which we should have waterproofed better. And so it was knowing the parts of the boat that are vulnerable. And I think often, particularly nowadays, the build up to the Fastnet often lulls us into a false sense of security. We do too many light races, and then the Fastnet seems to serve up a kicking in the first 24 hours, and we learn the same lessons over and again. And then the final one, if I might, just as as a double, not as a double-handed, but I think it's equally applicable there, probably even more so, is go sailing with mates, because ultimately, no matter what the result, there's some brilliant stories from our boat on the Fastnet. I'm sure there are from everyone's, and as much as I hate saying it and I hate myself for it, I will come back in 2 years' time because going sailing with mates is brilliant, and that's what we keep bringing back offshore. So yeah, that would be my 2 points.
Cool. Tim?
Somewhat linked actually to what you said there, Henry. If you've done this race a number of times, then you should go back and look at the yellow brick tracking. And if you know what the conditions were in each of those races that you've done, that is invaluable to guiding what you do next time. Like we looked at the 2021 tracker. It made our decision making so clear for the first third of that race. So that's my top tip.
Fantastic. What I've attempted to do when we sort of are prepared for this is summarise some of the key lessons that I think have come out of this that will endure, so that weren't specific to this particular race but will endure. And hopefully you can read them, but I'll go through them. So often in this Fastnet, the start is important. Because of the tidal gate at Portland, the rich often get richer. So that is important, but you want to stay out of trouble. If you've got a rough, windy start, you can prepare the sails in the harbour. You can put the reefs in before you leave the dock, and that makes life so much easier. And there's potential for errors, apparently. Know your boat and crew. Make the right decisions for you. It might be it might be the right choice to go with just one reef and a J3 and go straight down the Needle Channel. It might be to take the North Channel. That's what we did. It might be to take shelter and go out again 12 or 24 hours later. Whatever's right for your boat is right, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Do be prepared for bad weather. Most Fastnets are light wind races, but you've got to be prepared for gales. It's offshore sailing. You have to be prepared for bad weather. Be prepared for breakages. Know how to fix them. Know your boat. We had problems with our data on our network. That threw the pilot out. We've got another pilot, and Rob knows the boat well enough to disconnect things and to make it work. So, repairing your mainsail. Be prepared for breakages. Plan in advance. North Channel Needles, inshore offshore Portland. Likely route to the TSS at Scilly. Sources of weather and current data. All those things. Know when the tide turns at each headland and whether it's safe to cheat the tide. Where are the rocks? Where can you go? And what conditions are you happy going through it in? Inshore and offshore at Portland is always a key decision. And interestingly, people have been through in 35 knots, so it wasn't too bad. I still think twice about it in those conditions, but good to learn from that experience. And be ready for the next sail change. Talk them through before you do it, especially if because this is challenging. Ready to an example, but manage the risk. For example, to peel or not to peel. Our rule on peeling between spinnakers is if you can trust the pilot to steer or a crew to steer, then it's safe to do that. If it's not, don't take the risk. And last slide. Know the cost benefit of sail changes. How long it takes, what the impact is on the crew. If you've got a finite resource there, they're going to get cold, wet, and miserable. A bit of planning in advance there. You can learn a lot from the AIS. There's potential to gain places at headlands. We gained a lot at Land's End because we saw boats close to shore who were pretty much becalmed and going nowhere. We sailed around them and gained a lot of places. So the AIS can gain you a lot. And never give up. You may have a rubbish first half, but you can make amends in the second half. If you do it in the first half, well, that's your problem. Strategy offshore is often different to inshore. In particular, from between Land's End and the Rock on the way out, it paid to sail fast and low below the run line. Red Ruby did that, and they gained a lot because the weather had completely changed by the time they got closer. So it didn't matter; they're off the run line; they were closer to the Rock. Just think about that. You have to sort of challenge your perceptions. Manage risk. On the return leg, going north of the Scilly West TSS was a risk. It paid for some boats, it paid for Red Ruby, but pretty much every boat ahead of it lost out. And I think Axsail lost about 5 miles. A shift was forecast. What was the benefit if it came as planned, and what was the cost if it didn't? Manage your crew and your energy. You need to be able to fly a kite in 25 knots in this race and the last 100 mile of a 700-mile race, possibly without a pilot. And keep a lookout for ships coming out the TSS in the driving rain and the dark, coming up between behind your head sail. You've got to have some reserves left in the tank. With this new course, pay attention carefully to the tides around Alderney and Cap to the Hague. Even a mile or two of separation can make a big difference. We went quite a bit north of Alderney, and we gained quite a lot on boats who went very close because we just had more tide. in the winds we had, you could get through in any conditions, but in light airs, that could be the decider and could make a big difference. And lastly, speed in the spinnaker can make a big difference. There were some examples of people in the same boat gaining like 5 miles on that last leg on other boats just because they were going fast on the spinnaker. So that's our summary. Open to questions, really. Has anybody got any questions or comments or even lessons from their boats? Sam. Yeah.
So Sam from Missouri, great talk. Thank you, everyone. I don't know if anyone on the panel did go to orange sails at any stage, like when you were repairing stuff, but we did see some boats doing that because during the race, specifically on that first night, 2 reefs was too much sail area for them. I noticed the guy from Australia talks about having 3 reefs set up for his boat. I just wonder if anyone up there's got any views on like their next mainsail, considering 3rd reefs, deeper reefs for that sort of real strong upwind conditions.
We've got 3 reefs on Flycatcher. We've made them deeper on this mainsail, and we're very glad that we had them and we used them. So we started with 2 reefs and number 4, and went to 3 reefs in the Needles Channel.
What sort of wind strength are you doing that around?
I don't know.
So yeah, great question. I think we had only 2 reefs and reef J3. Our option to go down from that was to put orange sails up. We debated that quite extensively. I think probably being slightly faster to put our storm jib up at that time, but we can hold on. My hindsight is definitely have a third reef. Even if your boom and is only set up for 2 reefs, you can change. What I learned, we changed our reefing lines throughout the race in 35 knots. It's not, once you get the tack down, it's actually okay. So our lessons learned is, to definitely have a deep 3rd reef, and a J4 would have been the better setup, I think.
For a fully crewed boat, fully 36-footer with 7 crew offshore, we've always had a 3rd reef in the mainsail, and every mainsail we've commissioned has had a 3rd reef in it, which the programme didn't do before us, the previous owners didn't do. I've never used it now, and I'm questioning why we've got it if we haven't used it into 40-knot fastnets. The thing that we also have is a really stiff rig. So the previous campaign sailed the boat 2-handed, and they said the one change they would have made was to make the rig bendier so they could depower the main more. For us, we find that with enough people on the rail, actually 2 reefs and quite a stiff rig it works for us. And I also hate reefing jibs because I tried to do it under Land Producer on the Middle Sea on a 42-footer the other year, and it was horrible. So for us, I think it's quite a big change from our J3 to our GS, Storm Jib, which serves the same purpose. And we don't use the 3rd reef. So I would always, we've always put a 3rd reef in, but if we're not using it, we're going to question it for the next mainsail.
We had a double reef main and a J4 for the first day. We don't have a 3rd reef in the main. I think the decision making behind that is that the 2nd reef is enough, and if we're using a trysail, it's to go somewhere safe. And we've probably given up racing by that point. So we were never too pressed with our double reef main and J4. You could get the leech working on the fine tune, spill it in the gusts if you needed to, but it was kind of fine.
I mean, we certainly think our J4 is a godsend in those conditions, and it's not a reefing J3, it's a proper dedicated flat cut, high clue, and it's wonderful. Anybody else? Yeah.
Rory from Cougar. Henry, you mentioned in 2021 you lost your tough luff, sales out tough luff quite a few times. I learned that lesson this year. What was your method? So did you get soft shackles in the luff of the sail?
Yeah, so we find that the angle of our jib halyard against our tough luff and our forestay is pulling the head out the top, and when we slammed twice coming out of the Needles Channel last time, the whole sail just blew out straight away. By putting a soft shackle around the top, it stops the shock loading. Obviously, it means we have to change bareheaded, which we've done on other races. We didn't change off the sail on this race, so it didn't cost us anything. But we figure that if we're on the J3 and we know it's going to be heavy seas, then we put a soft shackle around the top because obviously the loss of the jib blowing out the forestay is potentially race ending, whereas actually the loss that you make going bareheaded through a peel in those conditions is not huge.
And then do you not use it when you're, if it's not rough, you won't use
No,
it?
no. The other thing we do, is also we tend to always use the left-hand groove, the one that's more prominent on the Hague and Tough Luffs. We always use, for the J1 and the 3, when we're offshore now, we always use the right-hand groove, which doesn't get used because it hasn't been worn as much because we do a lot of inshore racing. So we'll use that groove, which is tighter, and we'll put a soft shackle around the luff of around the head of the 3 to prevent that problem. That worked for us this time.
Around us, there's no point to drop the kite. The strategy was more, you will drop the kite when you blow the kite up. So none of the boats around us dropped the kite. They were just pushing, and we were discussing on the boat, and the helm was asking the skipper, the owner, we've got 27 knots now under S2. Tell me if you want me to stop, because otherwise we keep going. And he said, if I keep going, we'll probably blow up the S2. And the owner said, well, look around. We have the GPK Petit Doudou, they're still under kite. We're just all next to each other. He said, just carry on and we'll see what happens. We didn't blow up the S2. We dropped it at 28 knots. But then we put the A4 as far as we could. And then ultimately we blew up the A4. And and we carried on. And the boats around us, they were still under Spinnaker. That was just before the TSS next to the Scilly. All the RT3, the top, was still under Spinnaker. We blew up the A4, and then we switched to the jib and finished with the jib. We didn't lose that much anymore because then the tide started to turn around us. So ultimately, on that part of the fleet, people were just pushing until the sail. No, we had reefs. Yeah.
With Spinnaker?
Yeah, we had a reef in the main, I think, at some point. Yeah, but people just kept until the Spinnaker blew up.
I can add to this. So I can add to this because we were that British boat. But actually, in IRC 3, there wasn't much of a pattern. So we went from our S4 to our A3 to our code 0 to our jib. We had all sorts of issues with the code 0, which I'll tell you about another time. But actually, in IRC 3, there was JPK 1010s, you guys on Loch. But the JPKs had, one of them had a little A3, A4 type thing, A5 type sail that was going quite well. The Petit Doudou, the guys who won in the end, they came past us with a symmetric kite up still when we were struggling to hold our A3. So actually, there wasn't much of a pattern at the front of our fleet. We did consider putting a reef in. We talked about it very briefly. We didn't want to turn around and drop the main. We didn't think, and I didn't want to drag it down the rig either. So we just held on for dear life, and that was that.
I think for us as well, I would obviously, there's plenty I'd do differently. But for us, we've taken the rating hit to go to 4 kites, which always leaves us with a choice. Do I want the A1.5 or do I want the A5? I chose the A5, which meant when we were in the compression at the Fastnet Rock, I was kicking myself. And, you always end up second-guessing yourself. When the wind went really light and we were, fully crewed with a 36-footer trying to get the back end out and sail really high angles, the A1.5 would have mitigated that compression. But we then got the A5 up, and it was doing a job for us. It was really good. If I was going to change what we did, aside from going higher earlier on the S2, I would have then kept the A5 for longer, given myself a better angle, kept the A5 for longer, and gone to a reef. Instead, we didn't reef, and we went for the jib top, because what we did was, I think we wiped out with the A5, scared ourselves, and put a slight hole in the A5, and we then repaired it, but instead of putting the A5 back up, we went to the jib top and stayed on the jib top on the full main. It meant that we then had that problem I described earlier with lower average speeds. So we were peaking, we were surfing and hitting high speeds, but I think we had the same issue with lower average speeds. So that's, I would have done it differently.
Ed?
We're a pretty different shaped boat, so we weigh 9 tons and just take more and more of the ROC with us and don't really go any faster. So we were definitely, when it got tight, we had 2 reefs and actually number 3 up, and I don't think we would have gone any quicker with anything else up. you're at the hull speed. So yeah, very boat dependent, I'd say.
I kind of think that it, if you can hold a foresail, that is better, especially off the wind. So when we went to the Code Zero, we did go to one reef in the main because we wanted to hold it through the night, and we just need to be more French and have more balls. But because that was fine, we were absolutely fine on the Code Zero and the one reef in the main. But it got dark and we didn't see anything, and it's great in hindsight, right? Sitting here going, we should have hulked the Code Zero, but it was a pretty horrible night.
One of the other Army boats is the Royal Engineers, and I think this being the 50th Fastnet, even if it doesn't make it into the edit, I'd just like to give them a shout out, because I think the Royal Engineers Yacht Club was there in the first one and is pretty much the only yacht club that has been involved in every single Fastnet, and they did exactly that. They stopped, they fixed a leak, and they were the second last boat round the rock, I think, and we were already heading for home across the channel when they were still coming up to the line, but they did it, and they did it through sheer stubborn bloody mindedness. So, which if you know anything about the Royal Engineers, you'll know that that's what they're famous for. So yeah, a shout out to them, and well done for being there at the finish of the 50th.
You all did terrifically well, and that's a lot of what it's all about. I said before the race, I said prepare, survive, push, right? And we've heard that over and over again from you guys. As a club, we will do a review. There were obviously a number of significant incidents, and there's some important learnings. And I'd encourage anyone that was on the race to share their learnings with that review when we get the opportunity. We obviously have had some periods with less wind, and not those kind of conditions for a while. So the more we can learn, the better it is for everybody to enjoy the racing. So really encourage everyone to do that. And just say what a great job all of you guys did. Thank you.
Yeah. We thank the panellists for their superb job. I believe people are staying on for dinner, so the opportunity is there to carry on chatting over dinner. Enjoy.